This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 85. Welcome to the 85th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. I started this podcast because I believe that every woman has the right to know exactly how her body and her fertility works. I'm here to connect you with the tools and information that you need to improve your menstrual cycle health and fertility. And I feel so privileged to be able to share my passion for body literacy and fertility awareness with you every single week. Fertility awareness is so much more than just birth control or trying to get pregnant, because it truly gives you a window into your own health and your fertility. And I love sharing my expertise with my clients and helping them to understand their charts and connect with their cycles. If you've recently discovered fertility awareness, but you're not feeling confident about using it for birth control just yet, or if you've been charting for a while and you're having trouble making sense of what's happening in your cycle, I can help. Get started today with a free 15-minute consultation with me by heading over to fertilityfriday.com/coaching, or just click the Work With Me button on my website. And I would also like to invite you to sign up for the Fertility Friday newsletter. So head over to fertilityfriday.com/ebook, and as a gift to you, you'll receive a free copy of my new ebook, where I reveal what to expect when coming off of hormonal contraceptives, and I share 5 steps to restoring healthy menstrual cycles post-pill. And in today's show, I wanted to talk about some of the most common fertility myths you should know about, especially if you're trying to get pregnant. This episode is a different format than most of my previous podcast episodes. So if this is your first time listening to the show, welcome. I do have 85 previous episodes, and I typically interview a different guest each week. But from time to time, I switch it up. And so today, I just wanted to chat with you about some of the fertility myths that are out there. If you like this format, make sure to let me know. I'll also link my previous solo episodes that I've done on the podcast to the show notes page for this episode, which you'll find at fertilityfriday.com/85. So let's get started. One of the most common myths about fertility that is hard for me sometimes to believe is still a thing is that ovulation happens on day 14. So if you're a long time listener, then this is not going to come as much of a surprise to you, and you'll recognize that ovulation can vary. But I feel like it goes deeper than that, because even for women who know that ovulation doesn't always happen on day 14, we can still fall into that rhythm method thinking. The first thing that you need to know about the menstrual cycle is that although on average, a woman's menstrual cycle will be, if you were to kind of average out most women's menstrual cycles, it might be anywhere from 27 to 28 days on average. In a healthy cycle, a woman may have anywhere from a 26-day cycle to a 36-day cycle. And there's a lot of different factors that determine whether or not her cycle is normal and healthy, and it's not just how long it is. And for any of the listeners who may have recently come off of hormonal contraceptives, or if you've been struggling with PCOS or maybe even a thyroid issue, you might regularly have cycles that are way longer than that, and maybe even way shorter than that. And so it's important to know that a woman's menstrual cycle can and does vary from cycle to cycle. And most women don't ovulate on day 14 every single day. So some women might, but it would be more rare for a woman to have an ovulation on the same day every day. And so why might that be a problem? There's so many reasons why that might be a problem. I think that it comes into play in a few different ways. For a woman who's trying to get pregnant, it can be a problem because she could be timing sex specifically on day 14, regardless of what her fertility signs are showing her. Any woman who is charting her cycles using the fertility awareness method is looking for changes in her cervical mucus. She's looking for a shift in her temperature to let her know that she's ovulated, and she might be looking at changes in her cervix. But if you believe in the back of your mind that you're supposed to ovulate, say on day 14, then you might discount some of the things that you see based on your expectation. And even if your body is telling you something else, you might still continue to use day 14. And so this is a thing, and there are couples who have consistently tried on the wrong day And then with a little bit of education around the fertility awareness method, they will get pregnant just from that one shifting to having sex if you're trying to get pregnant to the days when you actually have cervical mucus instead of the days that you anticipate you should be fertile, because the world tells you that you should ovulate on day 14. And another way that it can impact a woman negatively is if she's trying to avoid pregnancy and she's using the fertility awareness method. I see this come into play a lot, where even though the fertility awareness method is not the rhythm method, so the rhythm method is basically when you are using your previous cycles and kind of doing a calculation. So based on maybe your last couple cycles, you tended to ovulate around this day, you assume that that's going to continue. And so it can come into play, not even necessarily if you believe that ovulation is on day 14, but if you typically ovulate around a certain time. And I see this all the time. So this is when a woman will think to herself, well, I usually ovulate later in the cycle, so it's okay if I, have sex now earlier in the cycle because I never ovulate earlier than this day. And then that happens to be the cycle that she has an early ovulation. So I feel like the 14-day myth can impair a woman's chances of getting pregnant, surprisingly enough, if you're timing intercourse based on your idea of what should be happening instead of what you're actually seeing in terms of your observations. And it can also reduce the effectiveness of the method if you're not actually looking at what you're seeing and instead making decisions on when you're going to have sex based on what you think your body should be doing. So I feel like the 14-day myth can be harmful in a number of different ways. And I also feel like I've seen it, how it works in the medical system. So I'll link one of my recent posts, How Accurate is Your Due Date? And the 14-day philosophy that women ovulate on the 14th day of their menstrual cycle can and does result in due dates that may or may not be accurate. For example, if a woman ovulates on day 20 or, even day 25, let's say, but her doctor is basing her due date on the fact that the wheel says women ovulate on day 14, well, that's going to be a week off. And of course, ultrasound dating can help in terms of making that due date more accurate, but every baby isn't the same size. So I wonder about how accurate these things are. And so that brings me to another myth that I think is costing women a lot of money needlessly, which is that ovulation predictor kits are the best way to predict ovulation. The first thing you need to know about an ovulation predictor kit is what it's measuring. The ovulation predictor kit isn't actually telling you whether or not you've ovulated. What it's doing is it's measuring your levels of luteinizing hormone. And what happens is your body will produce luteinizing hormone in response to rising estrogen levels, and luteinizing hormone is what tells your ovaries that it's time to ovulate. So a woman will typically ovulate shortly after that LH surge. It's called luteinizing hormone surge, but it doesn't mean definitively that it's going to happen. And so there's a few limitations when it comes to ovulation predictor kits. One that I mentioned already, which is the cost. And the other is that in order for it to be effective to the degree that it can be effective, you have to test daily in order to detect this LH surge. And for a woman who might be ovulating a little bit more infrequently, for example, if her cycles are a bit longer, it can be both frustrating and costly in terms of having to rely on testing this every single day. And I feel like it plays into another myth about fertility, which is that when a woman is trying to get pregnant, the best time to have sex is actually when she's ovulating, almost giving the idea that at the time of ovulation is when she should be having sex. And the way that our bodies work, it turns out, is that the best time to have sex is actually before ovulation. But because you can't predict when ovulation is going to happen, then it turns out that the best time to time sex if you're trying to get pregnant is when you observe cervical mucus. And when you observe cervical mucus, it's your body's way of telling you that you're approaching ovulation. And I feel like if we really got into it, and if a woman waited until exactly when she ovulated to get pregnant, it could be effective, but it wouldn't actually be the ideal optimal time. And so the ideal optimal time is when you see cervical mucus. That simple shift can be really helpful for couples who've been trying to get pregnant. I don't want to give the impression, though, that couples don't and women don't struggle with actual fertility issues. I don't want to make it seem like every single woman just has to have sex when she has cervical mucus and then she'll get pregnant, because that's not always the case. But for some women and for some couples, this actually is what it takes in order for them to conceive, to actually time sex accurately. So one thing that I can say confidently is that it does increase your chances if you're timing it right. And I feel like that myth that we have to focus so much on ovulation day and know exactly when it happened can actually hinder a woman's chances if she's not timing sex based on her cervical mucus observations. And another myth that I'll throw in there then is around the temperature. I think that it's kind of out there. A lot of women know that their basal body temperature will shift around the time of ovulation. And I think that the myth is still out there that it has some sort of predictive value. And so there are women who may be waiting until they see the shift and then trying to have sex when they see that shift. And that's too late. That is not ideal. That's not optimal. And the reason for that is twofold. One reason is that once a woman ovulates, the egg doesn't live very long. The egg dies within 12 to 24 hours. So after a short period of time, if it's not fertilized, it is just reabsorbed. It's gone. But the second reason is that the basal body temperature shift, when you're taking your temperature every single day before you get out of bed and it's measuring your resting body temperature, it's actually not telling you that you're going to ovulate. It's a response. Your temperature going up is your body's response. So it's telling you that you have ovulated. And so likely you may have ovulated the day before. And the reason for that is because after you ovulate, you go through some hormonal changes that actually change your resting body temperature. So the myth then is that it's going to predict something or that it has any predictive value. This leads me then into another myth that I've seen quite a bit. There's been a few articles recently that have come out stating that women can ovulate more than once in a cycle. And, meaning specifically that a woman can ovulate once and then, like several weeks later, she can ovulate again. And the way that ovulation works in the body, I feel like that idea that a woman can just ovulate more than once, it gives the impression that ovulation is this random event that occurs and that it's not a very specific biological event. And I want to clear that up because ovulation is a very specific biological event. It doesn't just happen. And in order for a woman to ovulate, there has to be several hormonal processes that are happening properly and effectively. A woman ovulates in response to rising estrogen levels. Once the estrogen levels rise to a certain point, it's a feedback loop, and it actually triggers the pituitary then to release a surge of luteinizing hormone like we talked about. And then that is what causes the growing follicle to rupture. It doesn't mean that there can't be issues in terms of the communication between the pituitary, so the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis. There can be issues with the communication due to a number of reasons. But with that being said, it's important to know that ovulation itself is a very specific process. And it doesn't happen at random. There are, certain animals in the animal kingdom that ovulate when they're horny or when they're turned on or aroused. So I think rabbits, and I think that's why they have so many babies. But human beings, then we don't ovulate just at random, and we don't ovulate in response to getting aroused or anything like that. So this cascade of hormones has to happen. And then the interesting thing is that after a woman ovulates, after the egg is released, then the ovary changes, it starts to produce progesterone, and then progesterone has this effect on the body that then prevents a further ovulation, and it also changes the cervix and it changes the cervical mucus production so that it closes the shop. And there's so many different factors that need to happen in order for a woman to get pregnant. And so after ovulation, those factors are actually shut down. And this doesn't mean that a woman her body can't attempt to ovulate a number of times. And so if any of the listeners have ever struggled with having, for example, a really long cycle, so maybe your menstrual cycle is like 50 days or 80 days, meaning that you had a period and that you didn't have another one for 80 days, like a true menstruation, and you didn't ovulate. What a woman might notice if she's paying attention to her mucus is that she might have different mucus patches. So she might, be dry, and then she'll see some mucus, and then she'll think, oh, I'm ovulating. And then the mucus might even dry up, and then she didn't ovulate. Her temperature didn't shift. She might be really confused. That's one of the situations that can cause a lot of confusion when women are charting. And then she might start to see mucus again and think, okay, well, now I must be ovulating. And then again, maybe she isn't ovulating. In that situation, if you were to look at a woman's hormonal profile, you would see that her estrogen levels are rising, and that would be corresponding with her mucus production, but not rising high enough to trigger ovulation. In that situation, a well-meaning medical professional could confuse that body's attempt to ovulate with ovulation and then assume that she ovulated twice. But the fact of the matter is that after a woman ovulates, all of these factors, these specific hormonal biological factors, happen to prevent her from ovulating again. Why is this myth a problem? This myth is a problem for a couple of reasons. One, I feel like it's a problem because it illustrates the lack of understanding, even within the medical community, about how a woman's body works. And that is alarming and not surprising to me, but important to note that it illustrates the lack of understanding of female anatomy, the female reproductive system. And it's tragic that there's such a lack of information. And I think that, you really have to think to yourself, why is this particular biological function so misunderstood? Why is this biological function not taught? Why are women not aware of this? Why are doctors not aware of this? This is a systemic, huge problem, much bigger than I think most people realize. Of all the information that's available in the world and of all the information that we're taught in schools, how is it that this most basic function, and take it back a minute to think that, none of us would even be here on this planet if this function wasn't happening. So it's kind of important, right? So why isn't it being taught? So that's one of the biggest issues I have with that myth, because it just illustrates that even medical professionals who are excellent in their field, who do amazing work, can still have this deep misunderstanding of the female reproductive system because this information is just not taught in this depth. The type of depth that you learn it, the type of depth that I had the opportunity to learn when, I was taking my training through Justice, and the type of depth really that you only get when you do fertility awareness educator training, or if you work with a fertility awareness educator. So, okay, getting off my soapbox and coming back. So that's a big problem. But the other myth is that it causes women to kind of lack that true confidence in this method and in its effectiveness. And by this method, I'm referring specifically to the fertility awareness method. Because if women can randomly ovulate every day or whatever, then obviously you can't trust the method. That wouldn't make sense, because if it was all just random, then there would be no way to actually use this as a method. If this is something that you've heard and it's concerned you and you've been thinking about it and wondering about it, what I'd want to say to you is that when you're using the fertility awareness method and you're using it accurately, all of the signs that you're monitoring are what is telling you when you're fertile and you're not. And so what it comes down to is when you see cervical mucus, when you're observing it and you're making your observations, accurately, that is what you rely on. And it is possible that your body might attempt to ovulate. And that can happen for a number of different reasons. A woman's menstrual cycle can be impacted by stress, by illness, by travel. And for any of the women who are listening, who've been charting their menstrual cycle for some time, those are things that you might have seen. So you might have noticed that, you go on a vacation. And I mean, it seems kind of counterintuitive. If you go on a vacation, shouldn't you be relaxing and all those, why would that be a stressor? But if you're traveling, and if you think about it, if you're going to a different time zone, you're getting on a plane, there's a lot of, discussion around radiation that you feel in the plane because of how high you are in the atmosphere. These are things that are stressors on your body that you wouldn't necessarily associate with stress. And so many women who've been traveling will notice that their periods are kind of wonky, or they might have been expecting their ovulation to happen at a certain time and it's delayed, or they might notice those multiple attempts at ovulation that I was telling you about, where you see that you have mucus and you think, okay, I must be ovulating, but then the ovulation doesn't happen, your temperatures don't shift, and you kind of left to wonder what's going on. So basically, there's a lot of different reasons that a woman's menstrual cycle can be shifted and changed, and your body is responding to whatever's happening. And so your menstrual cycle can shift based on stress and illness and all those types of things. And that can be misinterpreted by, like I said, a well-meaning health professional as though you ovulated twice in one cycle. So I think the takeaway here is that ovulation happens once in the cycle. And obviously a woman can release more than one egg. We all know this. We all know that women can have twins that come from two different eggs. But because of the hormonal events, more than one follicle can develop at one time. And when that luteinizing hormone is released, it can trigger, more than one follicle to release the egg. But after that event takes place, there's a series of hormonal responses in the body that prevent it from happening again. And so I would really question the information that's running around on the internet around women being able to ovulate more than once. And I would really look at that critically, because like I said, it gives this idea that a woman's body is kind of just happening. These biological processes are happening at random. And I would really question if anyone putting out this type of information would be able to accurately describe the functions of the reproductive hormone cycle, the cervical mucus cycle, the changes in cervical position, the changes in the endometrial lining. I would be really curious to know if anybody who's putting out this research could tell you a quarter of the amount of information that you can derive from, say, Taking Charge of Your Fertility, or Katie Singer's Garden of Fertility, or the Justice User Guide. So I would really just look critically at these things. And if anyone who's listening completely disagrees with me and feels that women can ovulate more than once, I would be more than happy. Send me the research. I want to read it. I probably shouldn't have said that because I'm going to get a bunch of emails. But yeah, no, I mean, this is something that I'm more than happy to look more into and more than happy to delve into the research. But I feel like it's really important to weigh in on this topic because I keep seeing it and I keep hearing people say these things that women can ovulate more than once. And I feel like it's more fear mongering and propaganda than actual literal biological fact. And with all that being said, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the myths around hormonal contraceptives. These are things that have come up with various guests that I've talked to on the podcast. And there's a few things that I just wanted to talk about today. And, I guess the low-hanging fruit when it comes to myths around the birth control pill is that the pill regulates your period. That's a myth because the pill actually eliminates a woman's period. And when the pill was invented, this was during a time when women were really skeptical. Women, for hundreds of thousands of millions of years have been menstruating. And the concept of not menstruating was foreign, and women weren't going to go for it. They were really skeptical of it, and I think for good reason. Their inner knowing was telling them that, I might not always love my period, but I'm supposed to have it. And so you're telling me that you're going to take it away, and it's just not going to work for me. And so in order to make the pill more appealing to these skeptical women, they created a 28-day pill cycle where by taking 21 days of hormonal contraceptives and then taking 7 days of a sugar pill or 7 days of no hormones, it would create a withdrawal bleed. When a woman bleeds, when she's taking hormonal contraceptives or oral contraceptives specifically, when she has those days of bleeding, that is not a period. That is what's called withdrawal bleeding. And that's what happens when you put hormones in your body for a while and then you take them away. Your body responds with a withdrawal bleed and then starts to try to reinstate those hormones again. This was created to make a woman's fake cycle look like her real cycle so that she would be less skeptical. So it was supposed to be comforting so that she feels like she's still having a period, and so that doctors can tell her that it's just like a period, except better. This new and improved period is lighter and it's less painful and it's always on time. And this fake period then became even better than the real period. And the interesting thing about that situation is that a woman doesn't have to have a withdrawal bleed. It could have been 30 days. They could have made it 50 days. They could have made it 14 days. It completely doesn't even matter, but they chose 28 days so that it would reassure women. And again, those skeptical women back in the day were not comfortable with the idea of not menstruating. And so this allowed them to feel comfortable. Well, I'm still bleeding, so it's okay. Because back then, if you just didn't bleed at all, that gave them kind of the heebie-jeebies. Fast forward to now, when women have been using hormonal contraceptives for decades now, it's less of a foreign concept, the idea of losing your period altogether. And so only now have they come out with hormonal contraceptives that can last for 84 days or, and then you could just keep taking it. And now doctors are saying women don't need to menstruate. And so you could just take the pill forever and never have a bleed. And I don't know what science that's based on, but I'm with the women back in the day that were really skeptical and it gave them the heebie-jeebies. As a woman, menstruation is part of the package. And I find it very interesting that we're at a point where our media is telling us that it's optional and it's unnecessary. Imagine going to a man and saying, I think that your foot is unnecessary and you don't need your foot. We could actually replace your foot with an even better foot that we're going to make out of titanium. And so we're just going to take off your right foot and replace it with this one. And it's going to work just as well. So blah, blah, blah. I know it's a little ridiculous analogy, but why would a part of us that's a natural, normal part of being a woman be unnecessary? And I'll refer back to the interview that I did with Dr. Jerry Lynn Pryor, which I'll link to in the show notes. And, in that interview, we really talked about how integrated our fertility and our reproductive cycle, our menstrual cycle is to our health. And that's something that isn't talked about in discussions of, menstruation is unnecessary. And it turns out that a woman needs to have the balance of estrogen and progesterone that she can only get when she's having a healthy, robust menstrual cycle. In the first half of the menstrual cycle, she's supposed to have her natural estrogens, and then in the second half, she's supposed to have her natural progesterone, and they counterbalance each other. And having that balance of estrogen and progesterone each menstrual cycle throughout your life plays an important role in heart health, bone health, and breast health. And who knows what else. And so I think that it's really important to address that myth. It's kind of a few myths together. One of the myths is that women don't need to menstruate. And, the other myth is that the pill regulates your period, and that having a bleed when you're on the pill is the same as menstruation. It's really important to know that those things are different. And it's also really important to know that when you're taking a hormonal contraceptive, you're not actually taking quote unquote estrogen and quote unquote progesterone. These are synthetic hormones that you're taking, estrins, progestins, that are not the same as the hormones in your body that your body produces. And one of the other myths that this lends itself to is that the pill mimics pregnancy. That one drives me nuts, and I've talked about it on the podcast before, because the state that a woman is in when she's taking a hormonal contraceptive is not the same as when she is pregnant. Let's just put that out there. When a woman is pregnant, her body is producing massive amounts of natural estrogen and progesterone. Her progesterone levels shoot through the roof and are really high throughout her pregnancy. And this is her natural progesterone that has a protective effect on the body and counterbalances the effects of estrogen on the body. Now, estrogen is a growth hormone. Estrogen causes things to proliferate and grow. This is why we hear estrogen associated with cancers. But estrogen isn't bad. It's necessary in order to stimulate growth and proliferation. Progesterone, though, is what tells the cells what to do. Progesterone causes the cells to mature and counterbalances. Estrogen has its role in proliferation, and then progesterone has its role to basically order the cells, tell them what to do, tell them how to organize, tell them what to get started and program them correctly. And when a woman is on the birth control pill or another type of hormonal contraceptive, she's not getting that natural progesterone or estrogen. And these hormones have a different effect on the body. And the interesting thing is that when a woman is on hormonal contraceptives, her body is still producing her natural estrogens and progesterone, except that she's producing them at a really low level, of course, because her body's being inundated with synthetic hormones. And that's the reason why it works. And if you were to test the levels of a woman who is on hormonal contraceptives, so if you were to test her natural levels of estrogen and progesterone, the only state that would be similar to is actually like menopause. And lo and behold, many women on the pill suffer from things like vaginal dryness and reduced sex drive and, lower testosterone levels, which is a whole other topic. And imagine that. And that's a huge myth, that the pill mimics a pregnancy-like state in women. And, if you notice all of these trends, they're all kind of little white lies that are told to women to just make them take the pill, right? To get them to feel comfortable with it. The white lie of making the pill structure 28 days to mimic a regular period to make women feel comfortable taking it. The white lie that it's estrogen and progesterone to make it seem as though it's the same as the hormones that a woman has already. The white lie that the pill is mimicking pregnancy to make women think that, it's just making my body think that I'm pregnant and that's why I can't get pregnant again. These are just not true statements about what the pill is actually doing in your body. So then what is the pill doing in your body? Well, the pill is doing a lot of interesting things in your body. And the reason that it's so effective is because it's like a triple threat. The pill changes your cervical mucus so that, you don't produce any mucus that's fertile quality. That is really effective because unless a woman has fertile quality cervical mucus, sperm can't survive. So they just die. So that's one of the ways that the pill works. The other way is that it actually interferes with the communication between your pituitary, so your brain, and your ovaries. It screws up the communication there, and so it prevents you from ovulating most of the time. And then the third thing that it does is that it prevents your endometrial lining from ever fully developing. It keeps your endometrial lining in a state that is not supportive to the life of a fertilized egg. And that's the triple threat. So it prevents you from ovulating, messes with your cervical mucus and prevents your endometrium from fully lining. And this is good in the sense that it's effective in preventing pregnancy because that's what it's supposed to be doing. But if you think about that, especially in this day and age when so many of us are becoming more health conscious, we're trying to eat healthier, we're trying to eat organic food, we're trying to do all these great things for our body, trying to exercise and all of these things. And you think about what that's doing to your body, I feel like I would be a lot more comfortable with hormonal contraceptives if at least everybody involved was honest. At least the drug manufacturers, the doctors who are, prescribing it, if they were all just a little bit more honest about what it does to the body and what some of the potential issues can be, for example, when a woman is coming off. And these are things that are highly problematic for women. I think that there's a few more myths I'll go over, related to the pill. And we've talked about quite a few myths today. I think one of the big myths that frustrates me is the idea that when a woman is on hormonal contraceptives, her fertility is just going to snap back as soon as she comes off. Now, of course, there are women who this is true for, and they go off the pill and it doesn't really affect them that way or that drastically. But I think that there's a number of different factors that are going on. And so the pill doesn't necessarily cause the issues in your cycle when you come off of it. But I think that there's a few different things that could be happening, and they're all related to this myth that your fertility is going to snap back. And it all starts at that young age when all of us were told that we were fertile every single day. It starts there because I have yet to meet a woman who wasn't told that in school. And because we were all told that we could get pregnant every single day, we all believe that our fertility is just so out of control and so excessive, and it's just so easy to get pregnant that we just have to go full force and really military style prevent it at all costs. And to some extent, that's true when you're 19, right? To some extent, it is true when you're really young, because when you're really young, it's a different ball game. It's not to say every single woman is extra fertile. There are a number of women who struggle with fertility at a young age, so I don't want to discount those women. But I think that is a fair statement to say. We all believe this. And because we're not given the proper information about our cycles, we're told that we can be fertile every single day of the cycle. And I think that is a huge problem for a couple different reasons. One of the reasons is that it's not true. You're not actually fertile every single day of your cycle. There's only that 5-day window that you could actually conceive. And I always say that I wonder if all women were told that there's only about 5 days in each cycle where you can actually literally conceive, if we would really have the same response when it comes to seeking a birth control method. I think we all know that some women would still choose the pill for a period of time. I think that it would allow women to be able to be a little bit more cognizant of it. And I think a lot of women might choose to take the pill for a period of time and maybe less time. Maybe take it for a period of their life where they know it's the best option for them. But if they know that it could potentially impact their health and fertility, they would probably switch it up maybe a little earlier. I think that is the most frustrating part, because there's a lot of women out there who, if they had known that it would take quite so long for their fertility to return, or if they knew that they would have certain challenges after coming off the pill, that they probably would have a little bit sooner, just to give themselves a little bit of time. And so this is where it's so important for dialogue. Although I do a lot of pill bashing on the show, I recognize that the pill is the right solution for a lot of women for specific times of their lives. And when I was 15 or something like that, 14, 15, I don't remember the exact age, probably 15 or so, and my doctor put me on the pill, I didn't know anything different. I was having excruciatingly painful periods, and it was actually a really great solution at the time. I didn't know any better, but it allowed me to have lighter periods. I was active in sports and I was able to not really worry so much about my period being painful and horrible. And I was able to do things that maybe I wouldn't have been able to do because I didn't have the knowledge and ability to adjust my diet and figure out the root of my menstrual pain and all those types of things. So I recognize that the pill is the right solution for women, not necessarily their whole reproductive lives, but for a portion of it. And back to the point about the myth there and how this can impact women. So I'm not saying that the pill is never right for anybody, but I'm saying that if we have the accurate information about the pill, then we can actually make informed decisions. And the first myth that I mentioned, that we're fertile, every single day, that's huge, because I feel like if women really know that, they can make an informed choice. But the second myth, that women can that our bodies are just going to snap back and our fertility is just going to go back immediately as soon as you go off the pill. There's a number of factors that actually determine how likely it is that your period will return back normally. One of them would be the age that you started taking the pill. The earlier that you started to take the pill, the more problematic that can be. When a woman begins to menstruate, when she has her menarche or menarche, depending on how you pronounce it, it takes several years for her menstrual cycles to mature. It takes several years for her reproductive organs to truly mature and her menstrual cycles to become regular and ovulatory and healthy and robust. And if a woman is put on the pill very shortly after she starts menstruating, then when she comes off of the pill, her body needs to continue that maturation process. That's one factor. Another factor is if a woman is going on hormonal contraceptives for a health reason outside of needing birth control. If it's acne, or if she has painful menstruation, or if she has really irregular periods and that's why she's being put on it to quote unquote regulate her period, then that can be problematic for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is that there's an underlying issue that's causing the acne. And it can be related to her gut health, for example. And the pill doesn't do your gut any favors. It actually has a really negative effect on your gut flora, especially the longer that you take it. For instance, if a woman has some sort of endocrine dysfunction that is contributing to the fact that she doesn't have regular cycles, then the pill just masks it. So your body's trying to tell you something. You can think of your menstruation and your menstrual cycle as a communication tool. Your body is trying to talk to you. If every time you get a period, you're on the floor in excruciating pain, that's your body telling you that something's wrong. And what you're doing when you take hormonal contraceptives in response to those types of health challenges is essentially shutting off your body's alarm system, preventing your body from being able to talk to you. And then because you're not having that pain, because you're not seeing those irregular cycles, because you have that acne all over your face and your body, or you don't, then you're not looking deeper into why, and you're not going to those health issues. And then what happens is that you come off of hormonal contraceptives right around the time you're ready to start trying, but you never listen to all that stuff that your body was trying to tell you. So now, in addition to trying to conceive, there's also all this other stuff that needs to be dealt with. And the pill didn't cause those things. It just didn't do anything. It just masked your body's alarm system. And then the disease process just continued happening in the background. And there's another factor that I think is really, really important. And I touched on it sort of when I said that, when a woman is, say, 19, yeah, she can get pregnant like that, right? Typically, women are more fertile, obviously, when they're 21. And I think the myth then, when we're indoctrinated at a young age to believe that we're fertile all the time and every day, and that it's so easy for us to get pregnant, when a woman then is on hormonal contraceptives for, say, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, she's of the same mindset, generally speaking, as when she started to take it. I've had conversations with a number of women that fall into this category, where you still have that mindset that you had when you went into it. Like, oh my gosh, I could get pregnant. I have to make sure I take my pill every single day at the same time because it's so easy for me to get pregnant that I have to be so hypervigilant about it. And I'm not saying that that's not true to some degree, but I'm just talking about that mindset of it's so easy to get pregnant. And the tragic thing is that the conversation around how easy it is for your 21-year-old self to get pregnant versus your 36-year-old self to get pregnant isn't really happening while you're on the pill that whole time. And so when you're coming off of it, you are of the mindset that it's going to be so easy. And sometimes it is, right? Sometimes it happens. Sometimes a woman still on the pill and she gets pregnant. Obviously, that happens too. There's no absolutes here. But it's important to know that, many women have the experience that when they go off of the pill, it's just not so easy. And that is the conversation that needs to happen, the truth about the fact that a woman can only become pregnant a certain number of days each cycle, the truth that a woman's fertility changes over time, and the truth that if a woman went on hormonal contraceptives and she maybe had some sort of disease process happening in the background, so if she had endometriosis, if she had PCOS, if she had a variety of different, health issues, the pill isn't addressing those. It's just silencing your body's ability to tell you about it. And so the pill isn't necessarily causing these issues, but it's definitely not helping. And this is why I get so frustrated, because I see how it harms women. And I think it's really important for these myths to come to light and the truths to come to light so that we can be empowered. One of the last myths that I'll talk about today is kind of, with all of that being said, that your doctor will just be able to fix it, or that, you can just look online and find a supplement and everything will be great. Like, oh, I'll just take vitamin D and then everything will be great. Or I'll just, take magnesium and everything will be great. And I think that promotes the wrong idea. One of the themes that I've talked about so much on the podcast is the link between your menstrual cycle, your fertility, and your overall health. And I talk about it all the time. And the reason for that is because your menstrual cycle, it doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in response to everything that's happening in your body, everything that you're being exposed to. It's related to your diet, what you're eating, whether you're supporting your body with enough nutrition. It's, whether you're getting enough healthy fats, all those dietary things. It's related to your gut health and your digestion, because you're not what you eat. That saying, you are what you eat. It's better to say, well, not better, but I think more accurate to say you are what you digest. And if your digestion is a hot mess, then all of those great supplements that you're throwing in your body might not necessarily be assimilated. And beyond that, it's not just what you eat. It's related to, your exercise, your stress, your sleep. All of these things are related to your hormone balance. And I think that it's really important to know that your menstrual cycle and all of the things that are going on there, it's not happening in isolation. And I think there's a myth out there that can just go and take a little pill and it's going to fix everything. And I think it's really important to know that your fertility is related to your health. And so if you find yourself banging your head against the wall and your efforts aren't working and you keep seeing conflicting information, and this month you're trying maca and last month you tried this and last month you tried that, if you're struggling, it can be really helpful to reach out for help. I think the other thing, we often think that because it's our menstrual cycle, it should be really easy to figure out. And the thing about your menstrual cycle is that it's a reflection of your overall health. So it's not just this easy thing. There can be a number of things going on. And in my work with clients, I've seen just the way that different things can interplay. So it's often not just one thing. It's often related to a bunch of different things. And you might need just more people on your team to help you sort it all out and to help you get to the root of what's causing the issues. I think that goes along with the idea that then your doctor is the expert and your doctor is going to fix things and have all the answers. And we're moving to a place where it's really important to know that nobody cares as much about your health as you do. Nobody. And we're at a point, I really believe, that you have to be your own advocate. You need to have people on your team that can help you. But at the end of the day, you're the one that has to demand what it is that you need. And you have to go into those conversations knowing that, many healthcare providers, many doctors may not have as in-depth information as you would hope that they would. And they also may not be on board when you discuss different alternatives and things like fertility awareness. And I think that's unfortunately, a really common experience among women who use fertility awareness, where their doctors don't take them seriously, or they're laughed out of their office. And not even just their doctors, their friends, their family, people in their lives just think, well, then you're just going to get pregnant. And so part of the reason that I started this podcast and part of the reason that I do this work is because I really believe that it is so important for women to be empowered and for women to have this knowledge so that they can make those informed decisions about their health and about their life. Because who else is going to do it for us? We're not even in the textbook. Our ovaries didn't make the cut. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it's a podcast like mine that's letting you know. And it shouldn't be that way. This isn't rocket science. It really isn't. With all of the things that we can do in our world, it's a really, really serious question as to why this is not being taught in 2016. So I just want to thank you for listening today to this different format. I definitely wanted to share my take on some of these fertility myths. I kind of feel like I was getting some stuff off my chest. I just think it's important for all of us to be informed and to really take our health into our own hands and to really question what we're being told. And so if you liked what you heard and you're wanting to deepen into it, if you've been charting your cycles and you're starting to see patterns that are concerning to you, I would really encourage you to reach out for support. Of course, I work with clients to help them learn fertility awareness and to help them interpret their chart. One of the things that I do with clients is to identify some of the things that your chart might be telling you. So kind of decoding what it is that your body might be trying to tell you through your menstrual cycle. There's just so much you can tell by looking at a woman's chart about her health. It's like a roadmap. It tells you where to go, tells you where to look. And so it can be really helpful when I work with clients, and it's really powerful how much you can learn from that. And so, I always say you don't know what you don't know. And for women who have found this, I get so many emails from women saying, I'm 40 years old. I've been trying to get pregnant for 2 years and I stumbled on your podcast. I really wish I would have known this when I was in my 20s. And I think to myself, well, if you're struggling and if you're feeling that this is kind of time sensitive, you don't want to kind of fumble around for several months. I'd want to ask, where will you be, in 6 months? If you seek support from somebody who can help you interpret your charts and help you feel more confident in fertility awareness charting in general, it can save you so much time and frustration and really help to solidify your knowledge and your confidence. And so I would encourage you to think about that. If you're interested in working with me, I offer free 15-minute consultations, and it allows my potential clients to ask questions and to get a sense of the programs that I offer. So if that's something that sounds interesting to you, definitely go to the site fertilityfriday.com and click on the Work With Me tab, or just go to fertilityfriday.com/coaching, and you can actually book your free 15-minute consultation with me if you're wanting to delve deeper into this. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to leave a comment in the show notes page, which you'll find at fertilityfriday.com/85. And remember that no one cares as much about your health and your fertility as you do. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode at fertilityfriday.com/85. If you've been enjoying the podcast, please look for it on iTunes and leave a 5-star review so that more people can find it. And make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com and join my email list. If you have an idea for a podcast episode or a guest suggestion, send me an email at info@fertilityfriday.com. I just want to thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I appreciate all of you for taking the time to tune into the podcast, whether you're on the go, commuting to work, walking the dog, doing dishes. Thank you again. And as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.